On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Eli Wachs. He is co-founder and CEO of Footprint. We're going to be talking about managing long-term roadmaps. Obviously, as a startup, things shift, things move around. How far do you look? How certain are you on the path you're going down? Obviously, some features might unlock opportunities down the road. And, I think Eli is going to be on to share with us some of his views on this. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about, the learning experience of this process and how he's been kind of folding that back into the company. I'm excited to have you on the show, Eli. Thanks for being on.
Thanks for having me. Excited to chat. Fun conversation.
Absolutely. All right. So, obviously, love to know what Footprint does before we dive in. If you could just give us a little bit of high level, that'd be awesome.
Footprint, we're an automated onboarding company. You can kind of think of us like Stripe for identity. We give companies UX components. Think of them as little invisible boxes, and they'll collect your identity information. So if you as a consumer are going to apply to rent a home, rent an apartment, open a bank account, you have to go through what's known as Know Your Customer, KYC. And what we do is we do that and we automate it. So we automate the collection, we automate the behavioral fraud element, we then do the security, and we do the reauthentication. So when we think about it, fraud can happen because your identity has been breached. It's been, there have been a couple of big hacks recently, or somebody can take over your account. And to us, we think you need to solve all three at once. And more broadly, you need to centralize identity. So that's what we're building here.
All right. So we're going to be talking about managing long-term roadmaps. And I think the thing that really stuck out when we were speaking before the recording was you mentioned intentionally trying to solve a problem. And obviously going into it with a distinct intent and kind of building out your roadmap. But I guess at the top, when you, and Footprint's a great example, obviously, it seems like it's a very particular product to solve a particular problem. When you're looking to find that problem to solve with like intentionality, kind of walk us through how you found it. Because I think that's always the hardest thing when I hear, people when their companies are up and running, you can always look back, it's easy. But at the time, there's either confidence, there's something in it that makes you feel like I might have something of a problem I'm solving with this idea.
I think it's tough. And one of the things I push back on heavily that VCs, Y Combinator will peddle is, hey, you're a smart young kid, you should start a company. Well, what a terrible idea. This, it can be very rewarding, but this isn't getting dinner Friday night. It's what you're going to be spending, maybe a decade of your life on, and not just you. It'd be one thing if it was you, but you're going to recruit others to do it. You're going to be raising capital. And I don't think that can just be a spontaneous, I'm smart, so I started a company decision. I think the lean startup, this idea of you'll figure it out, I think it is very good for VCs. If VCs get 20 kids from Stanford and MIT each year to go and start companies, enough will build really good companies that will return the funds. It may be painful, but they'll do it. But the vast majority won't. And we don't have diversified portfolios as entrepreneurs. So that's maybe where I'd start. In terms of then going about that problem solving, there are many different flavors. I'm not smart enough to be an engineer. I joke that I was kicked out of our company, GitHub. But there are plenty of good examples of engineers who solve problems in their companies. We saw it a lot at Stripe, where we've seen it at Ramp recently. And then they built companies to solve that for other companies. I think that's a pretty good example. For me, I was very passionate about privacy. And I'd been ideating on Footprint for close to 2 years. I wrote the first business plan from my dorm room February 3rd, 2020, right before the pandemic. We pretty much raised the seed round on that 2-year anniversary. And in the time between that, there were plenty of people who said you should start it. And looking back, I'm very glad that I waited. Now, you could argue that if we'd started it earlier, maybe there would have been different customers there, et cetera. But the idea wasn't ready. Would there have been flywheels to maybe get that more quickly? Perhaps, but it's a pretty complex compound platform that we've built. And when we started it, Alex and I pretty much had a 1-year roadmap. The first year of the company, we built identity meets security. That was the one-line pitch at the seed round. It's still the core one-line pitch of Footprint. And that's what we said we were doing. We were flexible about, we had to learn a lot along the way. because we had to learn more of the nuances of KYC and risk. But in terms of the product would look like, we were very definitive of what that first year would look like, for better or worse. And I think kind of in terms of me having the confidence to start the company, I felt really confident because I felt good that that's what we were going to build. And I think when you're raising money, you really got to believe. And I think it's tough to believe when it's, a loosely held conviction in something.
That's interesting. I think, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there to unpack. And you mentioned the 1-year roadmap. And I guess that, we're talking about managing long-term roadmaps. Let's talk about that. 1 year goes by fast. Obviously, you mentioned that the core of what you started out is still the premise of the company, identity meets security. As you kind of were journeying down the 1-year roadmap, and you guys are busy, things are hectic. I mean, talk to us a little bit about how you reevaluated things along the way, right? Because 1 year's not long. It feels like it sounds like a long time, but we're just joking. The 2024 is half over, and it's rocketing to the end already. And I kind of look at that and I go, what point do you start thinking about year 2? What do you start putting in year 2? Because you're still sussing out pieces, and you've got to start building out and make some assumptions and whatnot. I guess kind of walk us through a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think it's easier in a way year one, in that it depends what type of company you're building, but you don't have customers, you don't have customer requests, blessing and a curse. Today I think it's tougher for us to say, hey, here are the 3 things. And we have to be almost more firm of, hey, we're shipping this by the end of Q1, and there's going to be stuff that comes up. You have to really ruthlessly prioritize. It's part of why we built with a very lean team of, you really have to prioritize what the things are that are going to be important. In terms of the start, you're going to be building out a team. When we thought of the 1-year roadmap, there were a couple of different orders that we arguably could have built it in. And we somewhat built it in the order that the team came together. At first, my co-founder, Alex, has a really deep expertise in security and cryptography. So one of the first things we built was our vaulting, or kind of our use of Nitro enclaves. Then we were very lucky to bring on a couple amazing front-end engineers and designer, a couple, quarter or so into the company. So then we built the UX part of Footprint. And then in fall of the first year, we were able to hire 2 incredible fraud and risk leaders. And they helped us then build the final thing that we needed to launch, which was kind of our rules engine. You arguably could have done those in any order. It would have looked a little different. So in a way, part of year 1 was, hey, there are a couple things that need to be built, and we're going to do it based off what's on the table. When we got into the end of year 1 into year 2, what we thought about there were pretty much 2 areas that Alex and I thought we should bet on. And what we did is we said, we're going to build each of these to about 80%, and we're going to hope one of them works. And interestingly, one of them paid off very quickly. It helped us get one of our larger customers a couple months into year 2. The other one didn't really pay off at all for a year. And then it did. And we still debate if it was right or wrong to do it and how we thought about that bet. But you don't have that many bets. And I'm really glad we hit on at least one of those at the beginning.
You say something that's interesting that I think comes up in everyone's life. And I think we look at decisions and the trade-offs. And I mean, there's different perspectives in how you balance it. You can be risk averse. You can be a lot of different things. And I guess you just mentioned there were 2 core pillars that you basically had a hypothesis, and you were like, let's test it and see which one works out. At the time, and this is if you can recall at the time, was there a fear component to that of, hey, what if they're both wrong? Or was it at that point we have to have some decisions made, right or wrong, we'll tweak it? I mean, what was the mental side of those 2 that you guys went with?
I remember it very vividly, actually, because my co-founder Alex and I, we did a mini founder offsite. Something I highly encourage all founders to do. Every time Alex and I do them, we always lament that we don't do them more. And this was the first time we did it. And we were having this discussion of, hey, we're almost a year in. We think the product's really good, but we also think this is a very competitive space. And our thinking was we need to double down the areas that we think we're good at to get some companies to use us. And the thinking was we don't need this doesn't need to be the reasons that footprint becomes huge. We don't need to raise the Series A off this, but we need to be able to leverage this and start getting the traction. Not to get too granular on the spaces, but one of the bets was vaulting credit cards. Now, this sounds weird in that KYC, know your customer, does not involve credit cards. It involves verifying your social security number, your date of birth. What we believe, though, is we said, we don't think our security pitch is resonating all the way because we're actually not a full solution for secure information storage. We said we think a lot of the companies that may use Footprint, they're also going to need to vault credit cards. So if we're not vaulting credit cards, then the security is kind of lost. But if we can also vault credit cards, well, then we maybe really have something. And that really paid off. One of our best customers, something we're so lucky to work with, they started with credit card vaulting. They were also vaulting some of the other sensitive information, but they essentially said, we're going to eventually use you for identity. But the big problem we're going to solve right now is secure storage of data. And you do that really well. Even if we're not using you for identity, you're built to vault identity information. And it was a bet that really paid off. The other one, for what it's worth, was we said we think we should also do know your business. We said, a lot of companies that are onboarding consumers also are onboarding businesses. We should do both. I think that the thinking at the time was fair. I understand how we got there. I think, though, there wasn't a world where we were going to be able to build such a first-class KYB product and KYC product at the same time. So my co-founder, maybe to be nice to me, will argue that it actually got us to really think about our architecture in a way that has become very important. It did change how we thought about portability, but that remained dormant for some time. It was something that would come up in conversations, but it really wasn't enough of a selling point because we didn't have enough of a unique take on how to build that. Now we have a bunch of customers who are using Footprint KYB, and they're really happy about it. But it definitely took time, and if that was the only bet we took there, it would have been wrong. And just to extend out a little bit, and I'll stop my ramble. We built those in then Q1 and Q2 of 2023, and at that point, it kind of became clear that what we would build that summer, what we would build that fall, based off customer demand. So we really did not have many chances.
That's pretty awesome. I love the details, and I love the thought process into what it took to kind of get to that point. Architecture, benefit, which I'm sure your co-founder has enjoyed some of the ramifications from that. As you're looking at roadmap, and we're talking about, obviously, these are some two critical decisions early in the company. When you're looking at the roadmap component and you're thinking about, you obviously had the 1 year mapped out. You're thinking past that now. At what point do you start incorporating that, I guess, setting up hypotheses, testing with customer data? What point in the process do you have enough traction to start doing that versus obviously early on, you guys, I don't want to say you went with your gut. You guys are very intelligent, but you made a very good decision maybe on limited data points. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I mean, how do you kind of start incorporating some of the analytics into that hypothesis as you're building the roadmap out?
I think it's fuzzy in that it depends on the product and it depends on the customer. I think something we've learned is it's really important to choose your customers wisely. At the start, you're like, somebody's going to pay us for this. Amazing. But I think you actually see that there's some people who you do not want to take their money, because taking money is a responsibility. You don't have to, you're going to build feature requests for them. And it's really important, I think, to, especially when you're launching new products, to do it with companies that you think are going to be really smart design partners. We've found, for what it's worth, that typically the sweet spot there is a Series B company. In that they, like a seed stage company may have great energy, but they probably haven't experienced enough pain to really know what could go wrong here and what they're solving for. And then a really big company is probably not going to be as motivated to really workshop and solve with you. So for us, really, once we were, call it a year and a quarter in, we started really having companies that we were working with that, at least on some things, became those design partners. Now, you don't tell, there's not a formal ceremony, but you kind of just start building. And I think that there's a mutual understanding where, look, you're solving their problems. So, it's also why I think that's the proper stage to work with on it. In terms of the other, look, I mean, we definitely live in a world now where I'm so impressed by our engineering team. I'll look in our customer success like Slack group every day, and there are probably dozens of customer requests each day. And there is a balance of what do we need to solve now? What's a good feature idea that we should try to build over the next couple of weeks? There's also a bucket of what should we push back on? What should we say we don't want to support and we don't think it's a good idea? And then there's a really small bucket of what are the things that we really want to focus on as a company and still get done. And I think that you then kind of backtrack from there. Where we're probably at now is I almost will have, this isn't the most scientific, but we're not raising money right now, so it's okay. But, it's kind of in the back of my mind, I'll maybe have three things that I think could be interesting to get us really to where we want to go long term. And really just speak with existing customers and prospects about, hey, here are things that we're thinking about. This is what it would look like. Does this interest you? And I think now, we maybe have a bit of a luxury of kind of like hunting out the design partners. So it used to be, oh my God, like this company wants to use doc scanning. Great. We're going to be able to build it with them. Versus now it's like, this is something we want to do. Let's see somebody who would genuinely bring value to. And we have enough customers now where if none of them think they get value, I think that we can really bet again, but there may be something there. I think it's different at the beginning. When we started the company, the reason we just had a 1-year roadmap was nobody really thought about putting security and identity together. So you have to be careful about what you're fully trusting the market on. And then even now, when I think about my like kind of moonshot list on Notion of here are things I think we should build over the next 2 to 3 years, those also would not be things that I'm really workshopping with customers, and that they're products that don't exist. So they have to be things that we almost just create. And then as we're creating them, we can loop people in. So there's a messy science to it all.
Yeah, I love the explanation. I love the thought process. And as you're kind of talking, I was like, I wonder, you partially answered it, but I started thinking to myself, I wonder how far Eli starts when he goes daydreaming. You're the co-founder, you're the CEO, you've been running this business. Your mind must start drift off into, we could be a very big company one day. These are the different pieces we'll be adding. I guess you have your Notion, which you have those couple ideas that you're kind of workshopping a few years out. Do you start thinking about, not that you formalize it on the roadmap, but do you start personally start thinking, well, if we could get to that 3-year marker, 5-year marker, I could see us adding pieces beyond that and kind of envisioning it? Or is that just, you're just in the firefight?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I think that there's a proper balance. I think that, my co-founder and I would say there's probably value for both of us thinking about it. Alex from an architecture perspective, me from I'm talking, even if we're not raising, I will talk to investors every once in a while, and we should be thinking about the vision. I think where Alex and I try to be very respectful of, we're not going to really fight over these ideas, in that there's no point in doing so. I'll say right now, I won't say the ideas. Alex and I have pretty different ideas of what we would like to be doing in 2 years. Not professionally, we both plan on working at Footprint, but there's a direction that I know Alex is very passionate about taking the company. And I'd say there are probably 2 directions that I'm passionate about taking the company. And they're different. I think that we think that we will be able to prove to each other in that time, kind of based off the company growth and the customers, which of those makes more sense. But the idea of bets never dies. You're going to need to make those decisions. And sometimes they do kind of have a slow burn. I think there are kind of singles and doubles too. Those are not going to bring the company fully around. But yes, in terms of the daydreaming, I think you have to. I also think it's really important because you should have an idea of where you're going. But you also shouldn't. I'm glad that Alex and I don't debate over that, because I know we have different ideas, but I also think we trust each other, that we just know we know that those things won't be built for at least a year.
Yeah, I actually love when people do have slightly opposing views. You get to kind of see what comes to the top, and obviously when you guys have that kind of conversation, you're going to look at it from the other person's lens and viewpoint, and it might just spark something neither of you thought about, which I think is interesting. When you're thinking about these long-term roadmaps, you're thinking about these ideas, you're thinking about your Slack channel with all these different requests. Because you had mentioned, I guess maybe the last thing just to kind of talk to you about was, you mentioned looking for that looking for things that unlock more opportunity. And I guess the question to you is kind of as you both are looking through these ideas, the roadmaps, all the potential feature requests, is that just naturally come up, that one thing, or can you actually start thinking about, hey, I think this could unlock those different doorways and opportunities for the company?
I think you have to get out of your own headspace in a way sometimes. And what I'll say is what ended up becoming the biggest product focus for the first half of this year, it was something that I wasn't thinking about. Alex, my governor, had actually been pitching it to me for a month and I didn't understand it. And then we were meeting with a prospect in person, and he went on a whiteboard and started explaining this product. And then there was a coffee break, and I pulled him aside and like, wait, that's what you've been describing? And I'm like, I'm dropping the things I've been saying we should work on. This is 100% the number one thing we should be doing. And at that point, it became it. So I think that there is an open-mindedness of that, in that, in a weird way, if you are not wed to something, and if you haven't even thought about something and it's presented and it seems so clear and obvious, it's probably a good sign. So that's probably the most recent anecdote, because I would kind of divide up our products by almost quarter of like the main focuses. Other than that, you shouldn't say no to things, in that you never know when it's going to be interesting. It's probably, I don't know, if I had to bucket possible products, there are probably some which you could build. You just probably wouldn't be the best company to build it. There are some that you should build and you will be the best company to build it. And there are some that are in between of, in a year or 2 years or 3 years down the line, you maybe should be the company to build it, or maybe shouldn't be the company to build it. When I go back to the idea that Alex would like to do maybe 2 years from now versus the two ideas I would like to do, I would argue that the thing he likes, which is what I liked at the start of the company actually, is bucket two. I don't think we would actually be uniquely good at it. He may prove me wrong. And I think he would argue one of my two ideas is the same, and I wouldn't disagree. So you're kind of waiting for evidence to change one of those priors.
I love it, Eli. I think we're going to have you come on again in a year or two, so we can actually find out how the story unfolds. Because we're going to be left with a cliffhanger. Who's going to win? You or your co-founder? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'd love to have you back to kind of dissect some of those decisions and this process down the road. Definitely appreciate your time. Thank you for kind of diving in, talking to us. If somebody has a question, whether it's regarding identity, security, footprint, or just anything you mentioned on the show, what is a good way of connecting with you?
Email, I'm Eli at onefootprint.com. Twitter, it's just my name. LinkedIn, just my name. I send a lot of cold emails, so if I get a good one, I'll pay it forward.
Okay. I definitely appreciate it. We'll include some of those in the show notes so people can just click on those links. Thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. We'll be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Eli did a fantastic job walking us through his thought process, ideas, roadmap, the trade-offs. I mean, his relationship with his co-founder. I think we always don't get those insights, and I think they're really valuable, especially if you're out there and either in the midst of starting a company or thinking about starting a company. This is going to be valuable for you. So please share this with somebody else that you think might benefit from it. Also, please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.